We're here today at Sodoma Law talking with Jovanna Mastro about business owners and divorce. You may not realize, but your business is a huge part of your marital estate, so we've got all the information. Thanks so much for sitting down with me.
Yeah, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
So before we get into the business aspect of this, let's just talk about dividing assets when you're going through a divorce. How do you go about dividing property and your stuff?
Well, it's a big fancy word called equitable distribution. And so what you really have to do is, I tell my clients, you have to figure out what's in your marital pot, because some people think, oh, I'm going to divide this asset 50-50 and this asset. I'm like, no, let's look at it as a whole. So you need to identify what's in the marital estate, go through each property, figure out if it's marital, separate property, and then you give it a value and then you distribute it. So that's the general process of equitable distribution.
And I mean, how do the courts go about determining whose stuff is whose? Because, you know, when you're in a marriage, you're just buying stuff together, you're doing everything as a partnership, but then when you get a divorce, you got to figure out who gets what.
Anything that you get from the date that you were married until the date that you separate in the state of North Carolina is considered marital property. So all of your real property, which is your home, investment properties, bank accounts, retirement accounts, investment accounts, really anything in businesses can be considered marital property, and then you look at what's in there and then what the value is and then who's going to get what.
And is it always 50-50? Is it, or does somebody get a little bit more sometimes?
There's a presumption of 50-50 in our statute, but it's an equitable division. So the court's going to look at fairness. So there's factors in our statute that the court can look at, you know, like income, age of the parties, income disparity, who raised the children. Like if you have a stay-home mom, that will come into consideration. So sometimes they can award something different than 50-50.
And I think something people may be thinking about when they say that to you is, if their partner had an affair, does that give them a bit of an advantage, or does it not really matter?
So that really depends on the state that you are getting a divorce in. In North Carolina, for purposes of property division, no. It can come into play for something like alimony, but in South Carolina, marital misconduct is a factor. I do practice in South Carolina too, but it is a factor in equitable apportionment. So the judge can consider that, but if it's a long-term marriage, and a lot of clients have a really hard time coming to terms with that because they think that the person that cheated should be punished. Right. But in a long-term marriage, even in South Carolina where that can be considered, it's still 50-50.
Interesting. Well, we mentioned it before. We're talking about the businesses. A lot of people think that that is not something that's going to be considered, and they need to be prepared that it is. So what do they need to know? Oh,
it is absolutely considered. If it's a marriage, a valid marriage, and this business was founded when you were married, regardless if it was titled in somebody else's name or you have a partner or whatever, it's marital property. If there are marital funds put into the business, so the court's going to look at that, and we have to get business evaluators involved to figure out what the value of the business is, because then we're identifying it, like I said, with that three-step process, and then someone's got to figure out what that's worth, and whether it's that person's sole business or you have a partnership, we still have to put a value on it. Right. But some people don't realize that the business is to be considered, and even sometimes when you have a business prior to marriage, if marital funds went into growing that business, that can still be considered as marital property.
Is there anything that people need to do to prepare for that, or is that it's just a part of the process that you're going to have to go through?
I always say, if you're a business owner and you're getting married, get a prenup. It's not a bad thing. It's not a mean thing to ask your partner for that, but it does protect the interest that you have when you do get married, and you can figure out what to do later on if you do want your spouse to have a portion of that, but it at least protects it so that you're not in shock later on when you find out when your divorce action that it is considered part of the marital estate.
The prenup, people think that's a big, scary word, but it can really protect you, especially in this case when you are a business owner. So SodomaLaw.com, where you can find more information. We really appreciate it.